go? Do you know? Well, you've got slight imperfections in your hand like that. And I know this might be going over your head like this, but you know, can you feel, and oh, your skin is so soft, and his hair is so, I wouldn't say imperfect.
I don't know if I'm scared or excited.
I think maybe a little of both. That's the perfect combination. So can you feel that? And you see the way it's dropped?
I did.
And were you surprised by the way it dropped?
I've seen this before. I've seen this.
Where have you seen this? Don't you recognize any of what I'm doing?
This never happened to me before. I promise you, this is a brand new experience.
It happened to me. Watch him. Watch your back.
Okay, there we go.
Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. Now for today's video, I wanted to talk about Jurassic World Dominion and why I think it's so important to the Jurassic Park franchise overall. Specifically to the first film's setup of story, characters, and theme. Now, I'm sure you've probably heard this before, but on its own, Jurassic Park as a movie didn't necessarily need or even require a sequel to further explore anything that had been shown to us in the original film. A few characters learned their lessons, the dinosaurs were all doomed to die, and the message was properly delivered in a pretty straightforward way that was easy for the audience to understand. However, even back at the time when Jurassic Park was being filmed by Steven Spielberg, he insisted on setting up a sequel anyway, leaving Dennis Nedry's lost Barbasol can as a pivotal plot point that could be returned to in further entries. Basically, this was Jurassic Park's version of Darth Vader floating away from the Death Star unscathed. However, as fate would have it, The Lost World would toss all of that setup out in favor of a new story that didn't really follow up on what was previously established in the first film at all. Instead, what we got was a brand new island, a brand new set of enemies that we hadn't seen before, sorry Dodson, and a brand new lead once Alan Grant was dropped from the story and Ian Malcolm was given top billing to take his place. Now yes, some of these ideas do come directly from Michael Crichton's Lost World sequel book, and that's definitely why you see them in the second Jurassic movie, but really, these were some of the only things that were adapted from the novel, if we're being honest, and Lost World is much more of its own original story when compared to the author's book. Ever since then, the original trajectory of Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park trilogy was kind of thrown off course, and both parts 2 and 3 established themselves as something of loosely tied entries or standalone sequels when compared to the story setup that had been shown to us in Jurassic Park 1. Fast forward 20 years later and Colin Trevorrow establishes his new Jurassic World trilogy as something of a course correction for the franchise in order to both get the dinosaurs to the mainland, an idea from the original Crichton novel and what the first trilogy was supposed to do in the 90s, as well as set up a story of legitimate continuation to the first Jurassic Park that would actually put Dr. Grant, Dr. Sattler, and Dr. Malcolm back in the story's focus like they had been in the original film. You see, as it currently stands, there hasn't really ever been a sequel to Jurassic Park that actually followed through on all three of those things I mentioned at the beginning of this video: story, characters, and theme. Now, with that being said, the Jurassic World movies alone have definitely caught the series up to one of those things, being theme. Dinosaurs have been mishandled and greedily utilized in the last two entries, and they have subsequently found their way to the mainland all over the world because of it. The theme of control has been present in these films consistently, and no matter how much Dr. Wu, Hoskins, or anyone else tries to direct the animals to do something, it just doesn't work out the way they intended in any of these films. So yeah, as far as theme goes, they've got that covered in some of the later Jurassic films. However, when it comes to actually following up on characters in earnest in later Jurassic Park sequels, we haven't really seen that happen just yet. And this is mainly due to the story being abandoned in Part 2 and something new being created in its place. While this doesn't necessarily make what came after the first film unimportant, in fact, if you've watched my videos before in the past, you'll know that I don't think that at all, it does sort of make what came after Jurassic Park 1 somewhat less focused once you take that first entry into consideration. Steven Spielberg himself put forth the idea that Jurassic Park 2 would revolve around that lost Barbasol can. During this time in the early 90s, the Jurassic Park animated series was going to bring all of the characters back and follow up directly on the first film's story. The Jurassic Park comic books similarly did the same thing, and in most cases for movies back then, if you set up a story element that you intended to expand upon later, a sequel would pretty much imply that you're picking up directly where that story element was left. But this isn't really what Jurassic Park sequels did at all. Think about it. Imagine a world where George Lucas makes Star Wars: A New Hope. It's a smash hit and sets up Darth Vader flying away and surviving the destruction of the Death Star so that he can be used in The Empire Strikes Back. But what would it be like if that's not really what he ended up doing in The Empire Strikes Back? Instead, there's no Luke Skywalker, there's no Princess Leia, and Han Solo has been elevated to lead character in their place. Darth Vader is gone, but a brand new bad guy takes center stage. Han Solo gets a new girlfriend, the previous story about the Empire's dropped, and now we get to see a world-building sequel that comes up with all kinds of new mythology that sort of writes itself into existence and changes how we view the original Star Wars movie in retrospect. When The Lost World got rid of Dr. Grant and Sattler, threw out the Barbasol Can story, introduced us to Sarah Harding, and created Isla Sorna, this is pretty much what they did. Now, absolutely none of that is inherently bad. One of the reasons I really love The Lost World is the fact that it's so radically different from Jurassic Park in almost every way possible, and is instead kind of a brand new Steven Spielberg movie set within the same universe as the first film. Still, it's not really a proper part 2 for a trilogy at all. And instead of coming off like The Empire Strikes Back, it's more of an expansion on the kills and lore like Predator 2. Although I think Lost World is like leaps and bounds better than Predator 2. Ever since that movie came out, the Jurassic Park franchise never really had a proper follow-up that served as a true sequel to what we saw in the first movie. We got more entries in the series, sure, but we didn't really get a true sequel to the story of Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, and Ian Malcolm all in the same film. We also never got to see the full execution of dinosaurs escaping the island and running into the jungles of the mainland like what Michael Crichton had set up in the original novel. Instead, what we got was a couple of standalone sequels, followed by a legacy sequel, which kicked off a brand new trilogy that's sole purpose was to connect everything back to the original Jurassic Park and bring all these characters back into the franchise in an organic way that felt believable to the audience. Colin Trevorrow has gone on record saying that this is the film that he's always wanted to make, and it took a lot of planning and setup to actually get here, which is something that the original Jurassic Park trilogy at one time had, but then they kind of threw it out once they didn't know what the plan really was. In layman's terms, what I'm trying to say here is that Jurassic World Dominion is important to Jurassic Park because it's the follow-up to Jurassic Park's characters, story, and themes that we never got to see. They've done a little bit of those things here and there with the other sequels, but this time it's actually being tailor-made to be like a legitimate continuation, and I guess ending, to what the first Jurassic Park movie began all the way back in 1993. And like I said at the start, it's true that Jurassic Park didn't necessarily need a sequel to do anything else, but that doesn't mean that movies that don't need sequels never get made. Think of stuff like The Godfather, Alien, Terminator, or even Star Wars like I mentioned earlier. All of those movies kind of wrapped up their narratives in a nice little bow, but they still got sequels because that's just how Hollywood and money works. As a fan of this franchise and someone who has watched these movies for my whole life, I'm genuinely excited to see what goes down in the next film. Lewis Dodson is finally back. Biosyn is finally stepping up to the plate. Alan Grant is going to meet Owen Grady. Ian and Ellie are going to be sharing the screen with Claire Dearing. And source material Michael Crichton published way back in 1990 is finally being executed in a sequel to the original film. I think this is pretty damn important to the first movie, and it's the continuation of the original Jurassic Park that I kind of never imagined we'd actually get to see. That's kind of why I'm so excited to see it. But hey, those are all just my own thoughts on the subject matter. What do all of you guys think? How important do you personally think Dominion is to the overarching Jurassic Park franchise? Is this something that we should have gotten to see a long time ago? Or do you think that it's just cool to finally see it brought to life now? This is the first time Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, and Ian Malcolm are going to be in the same movie together since that first film. And narratively, the story is all about dinosaurs being released like all over the world. Anyways guys, whatever your own thoughts and opinions happen to be, I'd love to hear them in the comments down below. Now before I go, I'd like to thank all of my game wardens, as well as all of my InGen executives. I'd also like to thank all of my park workers and InGen hunters as well. Guys, it seriously means the world to me that all of you continue to support what I do, and I never want you to ever forget that. Now I'd like to thank all of you for watching today's video and hope you all enjoyed the content. If you feel like I deserve it, I'd appreciate the like and hope that you'll consider subscribing if you're interested in hearing from me again. I'll see you all in the next video, guys, and as always, take it easy.